Ooh, stinky. Or Carol. Carol's a rotten egg. Karen? The last one down is a rotten egg. I was only tricking, you're not really. Lie on your back. Ankle joints are great, aren't they? Again, if you help somebody find their ankle joints, their balance gets so much better. There's so many little adjustments you can do in your ankle joint. So you work with people who say, oh, my balance is getting really bad as I'm getting older, and look at how little they use their ankle joint. It's quite amazing. And the Seaus muscle is called the second heart muscle. Well, I never knew it was Seaus. I thought it was the whole lot, gastrocs and Seaus. Because when you stand very still, your blood can pool relatively in your legs, in your feet, because of gravity when you're standing. And people like me who have low blood pressure can get postural hypotension, like low blood pressure in standing, because our blood pools in our feet. And so if you contract your Seaus muscle, gastrocs and Seaus, like rock up and down on your toes a little bit, it pumps those muscles, and those muscles pump the blood back up into the body against gravity because they're very powerful. So that's why it's called the second heart muscle, because it helps squeeze blood back up into the trunk against gravity. That makes sense? And I learnt that very well when I was a new grad, because I used to love going to surgery. But if I stood still, which you do when you're watching surgery, I'd faint. And I was the fainter in my class at uni. So I learned to just rock quietly up and down on my toes. Do that thing that you did. Just lift your heels up and down, work the Seaus and gastrocs. Pumps the blood back around, increases your blood back up to your head so that you don't have to faint to get blood to your brain again. Little story, true story, from the true ankle joint. So how are you now with your ankle joints tuned up? And your brain tuned up with maybe greater internal sense of your feet, or an intellectual understanding of your feet? Oh, and while I'm just thinking about other bits, we've put the list on the front table. Please don't leave before putting your name and the ATM that you're teaching tomorrow, so that we can clump all the same ATMs together, so that we don't have the audience has to do the same ATM. Please. And we're going to lock the doors until you've put your name down. Which is, yes, a reminder that tomorrow is ATM boot camp day. Tomorrow, Wednesday. Roll up to sitting. And remove your socks, please. Just when I got them back on. And your toes are going, yes, fly, be free. Are you like that? When I get home, I just have to take my shoes and socks off so that my toes can breathe. Oh yeah, flick the thongs off. You can say that in here because we know what thongs are. If you're in New Zealand and you said, yeah, I can't wait to get home and flick my thongs off, they'd go, woohoo! Well, that's a bit crazy. Oh, right, okay. Is that why you wear them? Okay, good. All right, so now this morning you interlaced your fingers. Here's a little variation that Feldenkrais pops in, predominantly because some people, when they first interlace their fingers between their toes, can get a little crampy in their foot. Now, I didn't see anybody squirming this morning, so I presume not. Here's a variation, is you can pop your thumb between your right thumb between your big toe and the second toe on the right foot, and then hold the whole clump of toes together with your clump of fingers, right? So it's not as interlaced, right? So you're just holding. That's it. So your thumb is between the big toe, because most people, because that's where the thong thing goes, right? You know, your flip flop for New Zealanders. I can speak New Zealand or English. I'm like that. Fashion chops. Sorry. And now, could you lift your foot up a little bit, holding your foot like that? Just lift it up off the floor a little bit. How would you make your foot lighter? How do you help your foot to be lighter? Could you get interested in the sole of your foot? Do you really have a sole? You can answer that great philosophical question. Do I have a sole? I'm pinching that joke off Feldenkrais because then he goes into a big rant about soles and whether we have a soul or not. S-O-U-L, soul. Good. And then you can try the Jane maneuver, taking your foot out, your knee in. I'm having a look there. And how does that change with this different configuration of your hand on your foot or not? Is it easier? Is it harder? Is it boring? Is it nicer? Is it simpler? Is it whatever? Doesn't matter. It's just different. Good. Roll backwards. Play with your foot when you're lying on your back. So this is a really, really important kind of developmental stage for little babies to start bringing they actually have their hands and their feet, and there's this kind of symmetrical phase that they go through. And you can feel how it's really important for them because it lengthens their extensors and it helps them to organise their belly. So a lot of the little children that I work with, I remember once a little boy that I've been working with on and off for years, and his mum and I had actually gone out to the kitchen and left him rolling on the floor, not on the floor. When we came back, he'd found his foot for the first time. He was 3, and I got teary, and his mum looked at me, and then she got teary too because she understood how important it was. Because up until then, he didn't know that he had feet. Like, this is a 3-year-old, didn't know. So, of course, if you don't know you've got feet, you're not going to walk, are you? So he would roll everywhere. He was very, very smart. Still is a smart boy. He's 15 now, 16. So I've known him a long time. So he'd get around, but he would roll, right? Because he didn't, yeah. So this is profound, right? You have to know that you've got feet. And now your feet are introducing themselves to other feet because your feet are social. But feel how you have to round in the back and how your belly has to soften. Roll back up to sitting and interlace your fingers again so that it's individual, if you want to. So you've got the 2 alternatives now. If you found that that was, too intrusive, or remember the other compromise was just having the tips of your fingers interlaced. Like, you don't have to have them, base of your fingers between the base of your toes, but you can if you want to. That's very firm grip. So you're over the top of the foot. You can use your other hand to help with the threading. In this instance, your thumb can be on the outside. Yeah, we've done both. We've had the thumb, started with the thumb and then big toe and interleave like that. And then the second one was the thumb in between and interleave, just to see how that's different. Yep. He says this thing now, would you please stop holding your leg as if it was the most precious thing in the world? So stop holding it, because apparently they're all being very precious. So I thought you actually were being very kind to your leg, but I don't think you need to be rough with your leg. But now again with the toe, with the fingers interleaved, again just move your foot around yourself, explore could your foot go on the other side of your other leg? Did you forget about that side of you? Could you bring it to standing? What would it be like to, You know, I'm not saying stand up, but maybe you could introduce this idea of your foot could stand with your toes. Is it different now after the clarification that you did with the ankle ladies? And exploring. This is what babies do. They don't have a goal in mind. They're just playing, right? If you don't let them in the Tupperware cupboard, they'll play with their feet. No, this is pre-Tupperware cupboard. And now at some point, let go of your foot, but keep this kind of conceptual relationship between your right foot and your right hand. Remember we talked about this morning. And start doing the bell movement with your right hand, but have the right foot and the right hand kind of connected in your mind, whatever that means for you. So they might be in close physical proximity, and then explore, take your foot around through space, and as if there's this kind of relationship between your foot and your right hand as you're rolling around. So it's a bit of impro, right, for you theatre wannabes. And what happens when the hand is soft and it still has this kind of conceptual link to your foot? And that the link could be quite clear, right? You can think about your right thumb and the right big toe. You can think about the heel of your hand and the heel of your foot. The plantar, you know, the sole of the surface and the palm. So plantar and palm, same difference. The underbelly of the foot and the underbelly of the hand. The tips of the toes. And there's something about when you have this conceptual connection that makes the movement very interesting and actually quite elegant. If you all stop and look at each other, then you'll all stop and then there'll be nothing to look at. So don't. But, you know, cast little glances out of the corner of your eyes and see it's actually, you're creating some really interesting choreography. And leave it and rest on your back. And again, you're comparing the right foot and the right hand and the left foot and the left hand. Slowly roll over onto your stomach. Have your head turned to the left initially. Start the bell movement. Because you're looking to the left, start the bell movement in the left hand. Then gently, slowly start the rolling of the pelvis so that left goes back. And start to track the rolling of the heels and the feet that are connected to the pelvis. So it's the rolling of the pelvis that has some connection with the heels and the length of the feet. And then continue to the rolling left and right and add in the head roll. So this is very shorthand for resuming that. And as your face turns to the right, your right hand can start doing the bell movement as well. And you choose some timing. You're only going to do this for a little while, so don't get excited or don't get bored, right? Feeling this ability to roll and connect, feel this connection. And in a way, nothing in you is actually still. Is there any part of you that's still, that kind of fixates onto the floor? Could it become more mobile? So for some people, it's their elbows that are kind of pinning to the floor. Could you unpin your elbows to the floor? Could there be something around that your elbows are free to slide? So maybe as your face goes one way, that arm goes a little bit straighter. So some people are now pushing the heels of their hand in. Could the arms be light? So that there's never anything that's still for even a moment on the floor. It's a movement puzzle, right, that you can play with for the rest of your life. Can you track the little toe and the little toe of the left foot and the little finger of the left hand, for example, now? So you're continuing to think of the whole of you, and now these two little things that are connected, little toe, little finger on the left, little toe, little finger on the right. How can you be light enough on the floor? Would the swimming movement help? You know, where one arm really lifts and the other one arm lifts and comes up and the other one slides down. Did you think about that? The Australian crawl without the water. Did you think about your right little finger and your left little toe? And leave it and rest. Rest just for a moment. Slowly come up to sitting and then standing with this idea of feeling your feet on the floor. How do your feet hold the floor, let's say, like if your hands were? Could you pretend that your hands were feet as you walked around? Could you have dexterous feet? So if we've got this kind of connection between our hands and our feet, could you carry that kind of conceptual connection and walk around on your feet hands? 26 bones, more or less. Apparently dancers often make 27 because once some of their bones split, doesn't they add another, they technically have another bone. One becomes two. Fifth metatarsal from jumping. It's a dangerous sport, this dancing. Okay, walk your hands back to the mat and lie down. Some people were spontaneously doing the bell hand, which I think is probably a very good idea. Some very organic learning. Walk your hands and your feet back to your mat. Lie on your back, have a full rest. And so your left leg's only had this conceptual link with your left hand, and only a little bit earlier, a little bit then as well with the rolling. Bless you. That was a sneeze that did the whole bell movement with your whole body. Shona became an anemone when she sneezed. So imagine, think it through as you're lying there, that your left thumb and your left big toe could get acquainted, and the index finger of the left hand goes between the big toe and the second toe, and so forth. So that, and then you end up with your baby finger between the fourth and fifth toes. Could you imagine that in your mind's eye? And what would have to bend, what would have to fold, what would have to soften in order for you to be comfortable with your hand and your foot that intimately connected? Slowly roll over to sitting and go ahead. Fulfill your ultimate fantasy of interlacing your left fingers with your left toes. Gently, slowly. So start off with your thumb on the outside, just so that we're all kind of, thumb starts off on the outside and then the next finger. You can use your other hand to help. Go gently. So that it's kind of a mutual, this is a mutual relationship, right? You're not forcing your fingers. And if you have to force, then you can go to that alternative where you just gently, just practice, you know, you can flex the forefoot a little bit. So you can start off, now that you've got a lot of differentiation in this foot, just explore the turning of the hand and the turning of the foot, or if the hand, you know, the wrist extends back, does that dorsiflex the foot? So how could there be this kind of analogous movement? They turn together, they flex up and down together. So actually when you're looking at the sole of your foot, you in a way, you're looking at the palm of your hand as well. But could you really be interested in how these two things can kind of dance together? This relationship. And then start to lift the foot up, slide it away from you, slide it to one side. Slowly, slowly growing the movement as much as you're interested in. If you find yourself on your side or you find yourself rolling onto your back, that's fine. Don't feel compelled. It's where could this take you? How much space could the foot-hand complex explore? And what has to soften and straighten or twist or arch in your trunk and in your hips, in your shoulder, in your shoulder girdle, in your sternum, in your neck, in your eyes? End up on your back and explore or other position. What corner of the world does this foot and hand complex not want to inhabit? Roll up to sitting and rearrange your fingers. So now the thumb is between the big toe and the second toe. So you're just moving all the fingers on one. So if you started off with your thumb on the outside of your big toe, so now the thumb is between the big toe and toe number 2. And see if that makes a difference. So he makes a comment here about this is interlacing the non-habitual way. Well, I think you'll find that interlacing your fingers with your toes is pretty non-habitual for most people in and of itself, but that's okay. Off you toot. Have a little exploration around how that is. And again, you can start off quite small, just exploring this relationship of the movement of the wrist and the movement of the ankle, the turning of the hand around the forearm and the turning of the foot around itself. There's this amazing YouTube of this woman who's got no hands, and her in the kitchen. It's an OT delight, and she does everything with her feet. So she has to have a bench at sink height. You wash her, scrubbing her pots and pans with her feet, and draining pasta with her feet, and going over to the fridge and getting stuff out with her feet. It does your head in. It's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine draining pasta with your feet? She has very clean feet. She's got no arms, not even buds, you know. I've got a client who's only got one hand that works well. So she had 2 babies. I used to watch her changing nappies with one hand. She's extraordinary. People are extraordinary. The Caterpillar Man. Ah, they called him Bob. Sorry. He used to roll cigarettes in his mouth. Ah, right. Amazing. There's an Aussie guy with no arms and no legs who does the motivational speaking. I can't remember his name. Yeah, it's not really Bob. It's not really Bob. But I can't remember what his name is. Leave it and roll onto your back. Roll onto your back and have a full rest. It's better than a pedicure, this lesson, and cheaper. That might not be true. Might not be better. Pedicure is really good. Depends. How do your feet feel? You know, they're a long way from you down there, the other end of you. Or could you actually be down there with them? You know, they actually are you. Well, they are, you know, could you be oriented to the world from your feet's point of view? Please bring your hands together and interlace your fingers with each other. Now very gently begin to turn your hands around each other so that the forearms are twisting. So it could be in front of your face. So you could have the palms facing your face, and then you turn your hands so that the knuckles are facing your face. Just turning them around slowly, slowly. Slowly, slowly. Feeling, going so slowly that you can track how it changes the way your shoulder blades lie on the floor. And then you can keep the turning, and you can take them above your head further or more down towards your belly. Keep the turning happening so that you can track the influence of the turning relative to the position of your hands. So your hands position relative to your face, let's say. And you can do that relatively symmetrically to start with. And then sort of systematically feel how if you're turning the hands and the hand complex goes more to the right, for example. Gently, slowly. So that it's not random seaweed waving, but you can genuinely track what happens that's different, and this gentle turning of the hands that keeps going. When does it get more facilitated? When does it maybe become a little bit harder? So always the hands are turning, the palms coming, facing towards you, and then the knuckles are facing away. And what rhythm do you establish in this turning as you change the orientation of the whole hand complex relative to your face? What happens in your sternum? What happens in your ribs? What happens in your tongue? What happens in your lumbar spine, so the small of your back? What happens in your feet? Could you keep your hands turning and find a way to roll up to sitting? So maybe bend your knees, find a way that you could roll over and your hands can keep turning. And come up to sitting relatively symmetrically, so maybe your legs crossed, and just sit, and now do the same thing in a more social orientation and feel, what do you sense now that you don't have the floor along your back to tell you the influence of the turning of the hand? Is your chest now free to move? Does your chest want to fold when your hands go one way, and does it want to extend when you go the other? Is there a connection between your flexors and extensors as your hands go belly up and then back up, so to speak? Interlace your fingers the non-habitual way and keep going. The difference with this can be quite subtle, but maybe one shoulder goes a little bit higher than the other. You can make the movement smaller. What's the difference when your elbows are more bent, the elbows are more straight? Good. Leave it and rest in sitting for a moment. Rest in sitting is not an oxymoron or whatever, or an impossibility, let's just say. Can you find a way to rest in sitting? Sue's been reading the notes. You know what's coming next, Sue? You're going to interlace your toes with each other. So interlace your toes, so have the soles of your feet together. Interlace your toes. So you can use your hands. You don't have to do it on their own. So use your fingers to help your toes interlace each other, and take your time. You can decide which big toe goes on top and how much they interlace. So maybe it's just a little just the tips of the toes interlacing, or maybe it's just only, you know, the big toes interlacing. Just see how you go. Go slowly, because it can be very tweaky on the little intrinsic muscles of the foot to have your toes spread this much. But do as much as you need to be satisfied that there is this ability for the toes to have some kind of different relationship with each other. He says, if it's not so good as it is, you are excused. I think he means if it's not so good as it could be, you are excused. And maybe it's enough to just sit there with your toes interlaced. Maybe you'd like to use your hands to pick your feet or slide them a little bit. You can, you know, use your hands to push them away from you a little bit or bring them towards you, which is what you did a couple of, maybe yesterday. Remember, you used your hands to just move your feet around so that your knees go a little bit straighter and your knees go a little bit more bent towards you. You can use your hands to slide them a little bit left or a little bit right. Slowly, slowly. And if they get tweaky, just lie down and imagine. Maybe you could lean back on your hands and find a way that your feet, your legs could be light on the floor so that they could lift themselves up. Again, this is what you did yesterday. So they could lengthen by themselves, straighten, find a way to roll onto your back. Who knew you could pray with your feet? Well, I guess interlacing is not really praying, is it? But we were walking in Japan a couple of years ago, and there was a sculpture of two hands in prayer, and it said, "May everyone's hands be as gentle as those in prayer," something like that. I thought, well, that's nice, even for a not religious person. When your hands are in that prayer state, they're very soft. So could your soles of your feet have that same kind of softness, the way they meet each other? So you might be on your back, you might be on your side, you might be rolling up to sitting. And when you need to disentangle them, you can disentangle them and leave it. Slowly, slowly unwind everybody and roll onto your back and have a full rest. Then he makes another joke about the non-habitual interlacing of the toes. We'll let him have his little jokes. Has someone related his joke about jokes? Yeah, if you had that in here. So this is, Feldenkrais tells this joke in Amherst, where there's a group of friends and they're so used to going out and drinking together and telling the same jokes. They've decided, well, they know each other so well, when they go out, they give each joke a number. So instead of relating the whole shaggy dog kind of joke, they'll just say, oh, how about number 12? They'd do that, go out drinking, oh, how about number 22? And they'd all burst out laughing and so on. And one day they were out socialising and somebody not in the group was with them and he caught on what was happening. And so when there was a little pause in this sort of joke telling, he says, oh, how about number 27? And everybody just stares at him. And he says, what? It's not, why are you laughing? And the group says, it's the way you tell it. So that's Feldenkrais's joke. And that's in the midst of a great big talk about, you know, why you can use humour judiciously. When people are hanging on with their bellies or efforting or their diaphragms are, you know, being held up really high or whatever it is, you tell them a joke, like coughing, put your hand on your belly and do a fake laugh. So it's the diaphragm, right? And you're closing off the throat sphincter as well. It's like a cough. Feel that. So you hold the sphincter and then you're coughing and laughing, same deal, right? It's that forced explosion that you close off the throat and then you open it quickly. Forced expiration, that's what laughing is. Ha, 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 ha. Really, it's a really useful, your diaphragm goes up and down. Can you feel that in your belly? Ha, 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 ha. And you can, you know, he as a martial artist, they want the belly all the way down to the pubic bone to be able to move. So when you do a ha, right above your pubic bone, if you put your fingertips there, you go ha, you can feel that pushing out a little bit. For some people, if you're holding there, so if you're, you know, you've been going to, I'm an ironing board, give me a flat stomach lessons, it won't move down there, right? But maybe it moves down there when you laugh or go ha or something. So there's a method in that madness as well. So I'm not going to tell you any more jokes. I'll just say 12. That was a beauty, wasn't it? And you go ha 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 ha. Is it the way I tell them? Yeah. Forced delivery. Yeah. I'm actually not very good at telling real jokes. I'm actually really shit at it, to be, you know, in my self-image, I'm really shit at telling jokes. Roll onto your tummy or your stomach, you choose. Choices, choices. Have your head turned one way or the other, whichever suits you. Whichever way your face is turning, start the bell movement on that side. And what's happening in your hand when it's done all this turning and all this interlacing? Slowly turn your head to the opposite side and add the bell movement in the opposite hand. There's something about the turning of the eyes. And slowly, slowly, as the head turns, you can add in the turning of the pelvis. And then as the turning of the pelvis grows, the feet, the legs, the knees start to be invited to come along for the ride. So you roll over the front of your toes, the heels roll one side and the knees can draw up, and then the legs go back down straight and you roll over the toes with the pelvis being the initiator, as it were, and the feet kind of willing passengers, and that you can track the movement of the hands and the movement of the feet. And are you swimming or are you crawling, whatever? Try having either. If you really feel this connects with you functionally as a swimming, try crawling the other way around. Either way, you're free to slide and slither and ooze around on the floor. And then find a way where this movement could kind of change intention and you could roll onto your back. And keep the bell hand going and stay on your back, and everything else can go quiet. And then quietly, gently, the bell hand can reduce so slowly that you can almost not tell that each movement seems like the one before, but it's so imperceptibly smaller that you can kind of just pulse into stillness. It's almost kind of hard to tell when you actually really do stop, because the intention has been reducing. The intention is so placid. Roll up to sitting. A sneeze or a cough? Sneeze, bless you then. Coughs, you don't rate. No chance of the devil entering your system with a cough. Sneeze, apparently you're at risk. Okay, have your legs crossed and the right leg in front of the left. Have your hands behind you with some weight on them, but you're not completely committed to being all on your hands, so that it's a sustainable position. Very slowly, just thinking shoulder, right shoulder forward and left shoulder back. And the movement can grow, so it's only the right shoulder forward and left back, and then you come back to being straight. So there's not a counter rotation the other way. It's still this asymmetrical twist. Back to the middle. Right shoulder forward, left shoulder back. And notice at some point, as your right shoulder continues to come forward, that the right hip might decide that the floor is no longer a necessary place for it to rest. So how does the right shoulder shift the weight onto your left hip? How does the left shoulder shift your weight onto the left hip? What happens in the belly? What happens in the head? And with this idea that the outside of the left knee could come to the floor. And the next time that you come back to the middle, let your head sink gently forward on your chest so that your chin's on your chest. And as your right shoulder comes forward, your head kind of rolls around so that your right ear rests on your right shoulder. And you can't even kind of tell, is it your right shoulder coming to your right ear or your right ear coming to your right shoulder, or is it a bit of both? And then as you come back, could your head then kind of roll backwards? So in that whole sequence, it's making like a half roll around to the right, to the back. And then the next time the right shoulder comes forward, your head rolls around onto the ear and it rolls forward. So it's describing this half arc, and it can just as easily roll forward as it can roll back, but always via the right shoulder. And how's that for you today? A little movement that we keep coming back. The twatch. Is there something softening in your trunk that allows your head to fold forward, or your head to fold back? Good, leave it and line your back. Bend your elbow up so that your hand is in the air, your forearm is vertical. Start the bell movement so the back of the elbow is resting on the floor. Just the right arm for now. Left arm can have a little holiday. And notice where your palm is facing as you do the bell hand. So for some people, the palm is more in the direction of the feet. Some people, it's more in the direction of the left hip. Some people, it's more facing the direction of the left shoulder. And nobody's got it facing the direction of the head. So there's some opportunities for you to explore. So this is not dissimilar to the dominant hand lesson that Jenny gave you as a template. And how does the quality of the bell hand change when your palm is facing away from you, facing towards your hip, facing towards your shoulder, facing towards your face, facing completely away from you? Is there a place that you really like? Was it the first place that you started with? What would it take for you to really like it everywhere, in every orientation? Be quite systematic about finding out. Like, this is really important stuff. If you don't know which way you like to do the bell hand, you are a failure in life. No, you're not. It doesn't matter, right? But just could you summon up some curiosity? Why did you choose the orientation that you did? Is it your favourite? Why is it your favourite? How do you know it's your favourite? Did it feel easier? Was it the quality? Was it just a random choice? How do we make these decisions? So there's a reason why people didn't choose, with the palm kind of facing up towards the top of your head, maybe. Does that feel quite like, feel effortful? Maybe it feels nice. Where would middle be? Out of all of that, where would middle be? If you were going to find the middle way, where would the middle way be? The middle of the range. The mid option. It's the Goldilocks. The mid, not too turned, not too hard, not too soft, but in the middle. So the middle, which might not be your favourite, by the way, but let's say the middle is with your palm more oriented across your body. So if you brought up your left hand and it found the middle point, you kind of got two little Pokemons talking to each other. Could you get a sense of the palms of your hands coming together? Not physically, but in this kind of conceptual way. like we were connecting the hand and the foot. So there's this kind of connection when the palms are facing each other. They are conceptually linked. Could you track the two thumbs, the conceptually linked, the first fingers, the middle fingers, the ring fingers, the baby fingers? And then let them orient whichever way they like and see if you could still have them linked, but they're kind of, drifting away from each other. They're not facing each other anymore. So you're still rotating your hands around the axis of your forearm with the bell movement kind of superimposed. So with this idea, that they can be coupled together or they can be independent. One can be facing your feet, one could be facing your face, or they could be facing each other, or they could be ignoring each other, or they could have a different timing. How do you do that? How do you couple and how do you decouple? So this again is a very developmental thing. It's when, babies, where they go through this symmetrical stage, where what one hand does, the other hand does, is this kind of mirror movements. And then their brain learns to recognize, I have one side and I have another, and it learns to decouple. But it's actually always really easy to recouple them again, this kind of bilateral coupling, if you like. Feel how you can just slot into it. It's like the two hands become one. Can you catch that point when the two hands become one? This is a really interesting neurological event. He's so smart, this guy, to know all this, to have experienced all this stuff when we're now only finding out about it because we've got MRI. He didn't have MRI. He had his own unique, acute observations. Leave it and rest. Rest your arms long. And how are you? How are your feet? What's your sense of footness? So what are the qualities of your feet? What's the quality of the right foot? The quality of the left foot? And of course the feet attached to the rest of you via your legs. Compare the length of one leg versus the other. Sense your hands. Right hand versus left hand. And again, what are the qualities of hands? What makes a hand a hand? What's your sense of handedness? And could you link your right hand conceptually with your right foot? So you can think about you can sense your right thumb and your right big toe. Can you hold them together, link them together? The first finger and the second toe, middle finger and the middle toe, ring finger and the fourth toe, baby finger and the little baby toe. Could you link the right fingers with the left toes? I'll leave you to go through the sequence. Is that fuzzier or is it clearer? How about the left hand and the left foot? The individual digits on the left hand and individual digits on the left foot. Maybe we've got a few minutes. Maybe we could do another little play, another play within a play. Roll up to sitting. Could you interlace your left fingers with your right toe? So you come from the sole. So it's palm of hand to sole of foot. How would that be? Yeah. So see, so you couldn't read ahead and get that because I just made it up. I could see it in your brains though. Some of you are thinking it. What's that like? How does that feel? Again, just explore the movement of in the wrist and the ankle. So this is not completely homologous now, actually. It's not at all homologous because you're crossed over in the midline, and as your wrist flexes, your ankle goes backwards, so to speak. But could you imagine praying like this? Could you pray with your hand and foot together? If you want to pray, you can be atheist and not want to. I don't mind. What would it be like to have your foot lighter like this? Slide your foot away from you and a little bit towards you. Could your foot pop up in the air or not? It doesn't have to. Don't feel obliged. If your foot wants to stay on the ground, it's perfectly fine. Good. And you can leave that and you could interlace your right fingers with your left toes. It's getting easier, or your feet just had enough? They don't want any part of this handedness. They want to be feet. You can use that modified kind of thing and just have your big toe, your thumb in between your big toe and the second finger and hold the rest en bloc, as it were. What's it like on this side? Again, just exploring the movement of the wrist, turning, sliding of the foot away from you and towards you so your knee can straighten a little bit and bend a little bit. Do they like each other? They're talking to each other again. Has there been a détente where they weren't talking to each other? And so Barbara has been reading my mind, and she's got one foot in each hand. Maybe you want to try that? So you don't have to do the interlacing necessarily, but you could just hold, put your thumb between the big toe on one side, and the same thing on the other. This is not pretzel legs, but there is a lesson called pretzel legs. So it's so funny watching people do this, because you just can't work out what the hell they're doing. There's no way that I could describe to you anything, because it is so neurologically weird to see. It just looks weird. Look out the corner of your eye at people. It looks very, very funny. You just... And then the kind of threading business that you're doing, it's hilariously weird. Breathing is always good, you know. I recommend it. And leave it. Roll onto your back. And what's that done to your sense of footedness and handedness? Scrambled? Scrambled egg? Quietly do the bell hand and the left hand and the right hand. Do your toes want to kind of join in? Gently, quietly. Leave that movement and roll over slowly. We can keep the bell hand going and just roll over and come up to sitting. And then gently, slowly come up to standing. And if you want to just keep the bell movement going for a little while in standing, while you're standing and you're feeling your feet on the floor, and could you imagine the bell movement in your feet as you're standing? Then slowly, slowly, imperceptibly, the bell hand can kind of just settle out of your fingers so that the ghost of it's there, but not the reality. And start to walk. But the ghost of the bell hand is still in your feet. As your feet encounter the floor and leave the floor. So there's still this sense of 5 toes and, you've got 5 fingers and a palm on the floor. Is it sort of possible to imagine 26 bones in your feet? Could you track maybe 5 of them as they encounter the floor and leave the floor? How about walking backwards? When you're walking backwards, do you have more bones or less bones? More toes or less toes? It looks like you've got more toes when you're walking backwards. You all look a little bit more handy walking backwards. It's like when you put your feet behind you, they have to feel for the floor, right? Did you get that sense of, oh, I've got fingers that can feel for the floor behind me? Because I can't see it, I can't touch it. I can touch it. The only way I can explore it is to use my toes to find the floor behind me. So is there more of a handedness? Good. Okay. You can walk out on your hands or your feet or whichever way you like. Oh, well, you need to put your socks on probably because it's Melbourne and it is a little bit chilly out there. But I just looked up the temperature. I'm quite proud of this. Adelaide is colder than Melbourne today. Not that we're competitive. It doesn't normally get that. It was 8 today in Adelaide. 8. Wow, really? Mackay? Whoa, the world is arse up, isn't it? Not at lunchtime. No, well, at lunchtime today, Adelaide was 8 and Melbourne was 11. That's amazing. Adelaide will be whinging their butts off. 8 is very cold. Wind chill. Oh, you had the wind chill factor here this morning. Oh, yeah. Okay, so don't forget to put your name and your ATM on the list. Jenny, where's it gone? Oh, it's on the table. All right, so they really can't leave without putting, okay. Come tomorrow.